How did the Jets go from going to back-to-back AFC championship games to being an utter disaster in the last 14 years and not making the playoffs once? Find out next.
Hey, New York Jet fans from all around the world. Welcome to Laugh Through the Turbulence, a New York Jets podcast. The show that delivers you all your Jets content. Here are your hosts, John, Adam, and Monty. All the best to the New York Jet fans. Jets, 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 go Jets.
What's up, everybody?
How's it going?
Yo.
Good. I think this is the first time we're going to record this show where every member is in a different state of the United States of America.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I'm in Florida right now, enjoying the
very
sun.
interesting.
Yeah, the sun and all that.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is the week where we've been kind of talking about this episode for a long time. It's basically us talking about how the fuck did we go from like let's call it the glory years of pretty much our time period as Jet fans outside of the Parcells era, to just being an utter disaster, laughing stock of the NFL. Woody Johnson getting an F grade, and the only owner gets to get an F grade amongst all owners, which
Yeah.
so fucking fitting.
Rightly
because he's
so.
an absolute disaster. We're just a disaster. But how did we get to being a disaster and having the season we just had, which you could argue is the most disappointing season in Jets history because of the expectations?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is how we're going to start this thing. Adnan's going to start, and we're about 2 minutes in, mind you. So just for the time checks. But basically, the whole deal is Adnan's going to kind of start with what the hell happened right at that peak, right? Even to get to that peak a little bit, and then kind of how it all faded out. So, Adnan, you have the floor with Monty and I chiming in like it's going to be like our final thought eras where like we're only supposed to speak, but everyone interrupts anyway.
No, listen, I think having a lively discussion is exactly what we kind of need here. Let me go ahead and just put this on the screen here so we can all kind of take a look at this together. And
It's not so easy sharing, huh? Oh.
all right. So the first thing I think in order for us to kind of do this justice is we have to look forward in order for us, or look back in order for us to look forward. What happened? How did we get to where we are today, right? And I think the big thing we want to keep in mind is in this period from 2000 to 2010, Woody Johnson was the owner, right? So as much as we want to hate Woody Johnson, I don't think he's a great owner, right? He definitely has his flaws and his issues, no doubt about it. We saw that with the, report card that just came out by the NFLPA, right? We saw all of that. But he was the owner during this time frame, and he bought the team, just to recap, in January of 2000. So he was there for the offseason from 2000 moving forward, right? And as we see here, the Jets did have, in those 11 seasons, a record of 91 and 85. I know 6 games over 500, but compared to what we've seen, that's absolutely incredible. Won the division for the last time they did in 2002. Went to the playoffs 6 out of 11 seasons with back-to-back AFC, championship game appearances under Rex Ryan. So all of this happened, again, with Woody. Now, what happened from there is kind of what we want to know. And one of the things I think we have to start with is the lifeblood of every organization, which is the draft, right? So if you look at the 2010 through the 2000 through the 2010 draft, I kind of went through here and, looked at it draft class by draft class, right? What did the Jets do? What kind of players did they bring in? How did they perform overall, right? And over that time frame, they brought in 4 S-tier players, right? And those 4 S-tier guys, John Abraham, DeBrickshaw Ferguson, Nick Mangold, and Darrell Revis, right? Absolute stars for the New York Jets, guys that were the bedrock of this organization for years and years and years, right? They also were able to draft 16 quality starters, right? And by quality starters, I mean guys that we look at and we can just off the top of our heads know that they were excellent, right? You have guys like Sean Ellis, Pennington, Becht, right? All in one draft. Lavernius Cole, Santana Moss, right? Brian Thomas, who ended up being very good for the Jets. You know, Jonathan Vilma traded him after, you know, a couple of seasons after he won Rookie of the Year. David Harris, rock solid. Mark Sanchez, 4-2 in the playoffs. You know, you can go on and on and on with these guys. Even Brad Smith and Leon Washington, Jericho Cotry, guys they found in the later rounds. Smith and Washington provided you stuff on offense and were excellent special teams players.
You put Kyle Wilson in that group?
I think Kyle Wilson ended up being a quality starter. I mean, you can nitpick between him, quality starter or starter, but nevertheless, he was somebody that ended up, you know, playing in some big moments for the Jets. Now, with all of that said, you know, we look at here, you know, the busts as well, right? So when we look at busts, we kind of talked about this. I reached out to the group and we said rounds 4 through 7 are kind of lottery tickets, right? And so if you look at rounds 1 through 3 in that 11-year time frame, I saw 2 guys that were absolute disasters. Vernon Golston and Derek Strait drafted, and Strait was a 3rd rounder, picked 76 overall. You know, so they did a pretty good job of drafting. You know, they only ended up with 2 guys that you could look at as egregious picks. So with that said, I'll stop here for a second. John, Monty, anything you want to add looking at this? Anything you guys just off the top of your heads regarding the draft from 2000 to 2010 you wanted to point out?
Yeah, I'll just start real quick. Kyle Wilson sucked. I mean, he was just an undersized safety.
Okay,
right?
That's fair enough.
He was just undersized. I mean, he was part of that Boise State team. I believe the Liberty play, you know, he played great in college, but like he couldn't get to the next level. And I knew that was a bust to begin with. So that was one that I questioned, obviously. I figured there was a couple more S tiers in this group. Like I would think like, you know, Sean Ellis was great, you know, but that's just me. But like basically quality starter, if you just look at that group, right? Quality starter in S tier, that's basically a 27% hit rate, which is pretty good, right?
Yeah,
and then even the starter rate, I mean, that's you're almost getting up to 50% with that group, right? Or you're pretty close to it, right? And so like that is pretty good, right? And then like obviously like the backups are just not, and I guess you have an adjusted section too. Okay, I mean that's not bad, and you guys basically weighted out the bus higher, right? For being adjusted for lottery status. Okay, I mean other than that, I don't disagree with much of this. I mean, obviously it just seemed like, I guess the later like Tannenbaum was. I also mind you this like Parcells was still part of the organization in the very beginning, right? Even though he's kind of stepped down, right? So like there was at least a culture shift, you know, transitioning from Hess to Woody, right? And also Parcells set a great foundation by making that Keyshawn trade and also a couple other moves to basically load them up for that first draft class, right? That really did set them up. And then obviously Mangini came in after, right? And that kind of brought in some of that Patriots kind of shit, right? That they were doing, right? So like that was good foundation. But then obviously if you look at, I guess 2009 and beyond drafts, right? That's when, in my opinion, their drafting quality started to really go down, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna get rid of the filter by color over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that. Okay, and then if you sort by the year, right? So you have to go a little bit further left, right? I just sort by year, right? Sort by year. A to Z. You can do A to Z, or get rid of and then scroll down. Oh no, okay, yeah. I mean, like look how bad this is. I mean, all right. So we had no picks in 2009, right? But that's because they traded up for Sanchez. and you have him as a quality starter, although in reality for that position, he's a quality starter, yes, because he produced enough, but like in reality, he was probably a hindrance to the team, right? So like you could argue that the downfall of their drafting started with the Mark Sanchez draft. You could argue that because Sean Green's a running back, right? They are replaceable, and honestly, that O-line was so good, then anyone could have ran behind it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you had Thomas Jones running out of it, who wasn't terrific until he got there. Curtis Martin, and his as old as he was leading the league in rushing, like was not what he was, right? So, like, you know, that's just my opinion. And even LT coming in after all the injuries that he had in the Chargers and eventually left, he was still producing, right? Slauson, I don't even know what the fuck that is, right? But then obviously look at 2010, right? RIP Joe McKnight, right? He's dead now, right? Yeah. But basically, like, I mean, look how bad that is. I mean, like DeCassi and John Connor. Great name. But that's
And it's so funny. Rex called him the Terminator, but John Connor wasn't even the Terminator.
No, not even. Yeah,
he was the Terminator.
It's so bad.
Connor. If you want to live.
Oh my god.
Like, you see what I'm saying here? Like, basically, this is where the shit starts hitting the fan, right? It's basically the Rex drafting years, right?
That's kind of what it started with, right? Is as Rex started to gain more power over the roster, we see that deterioration starting in 2011, right? But to kind of,
which by the way is a big reason why I'm, you know,
and Tannenbaum is still there.
I'm not a huge, I wasn't a huge Rex fan, as far as, you know, a lot of dumb Jets fans were, you know, trying to kind of advocate for Rex to be the coach, and I just thought that was a completely idiotic move. He did get an interview, but no.
I mean, look, that first, you know, those first 2 years, were two of the best seasons we've ever seen. But, you know, there was a lot that went wrong there as well, you know. And then to kind of look here, to move to 2011 to 2019, right? Here we see over those 9 seasons, the team went 57-87, right? Obviously, no playoff appearances, and this was kind of spread across Rex, Bulls, and Gase, right?
How does that rank amongst all the NFL teams? Pretty bad, right? Bottom 5%, bottom 5.
Yeah, it's not good.
Especially in a salary cap league, and where the salary cap and the draft should always bring everyone to the mean.
Right. That's the point, right, John? You say this all the time, and it's absolutely true. It's the NFL is set up for everyone to be competitive, right? And to not be competitive for this long is really, really bad. Yeah. And that goes in to the 11 through 19 drafts, right? Where you look at these drafts, 11 was okay, right? Where you had Wilkerson, and you ended up with Bilal Powell. The rest of it was a disaster.
Curly was
Curly
right.
Curly had him as a starter. You know, he ended up being good.
Ellis was, but okay.
Yeah,
Kendrick Ellis was a.
But if you look at 2012, you missed on your first 2 picks, Quentin Coples and Stephen Hill. Demario Davis ended up being a good player. Jets didn't re-sign him. He's been incredible with the Saints. The rest of that draft is a joke.
Yeah, right? Wrong Robert Griffin, by the way.
Yeah, wrong Robert Griffin. That's the offensive lineman, Robert Griffin, not the quarterback. Now we look at 2000.
Was that the year he got drafted too?
I believe so, yeah.
They probably made that pick just because, like, Robert Griffin, let's talk about it, you know?
Yeah. Then you look at 2013, you know, they missed badly on D. Milliner. Sheldon Richardson ended up being the defensive rookie of the year that year. So that was a pretty good pick. Geno Smith, Brian Winters, you know, Ode Ibushi and Tommy Bohannon ended up being backups. Will Campbell, you got nothing out of. Yeah. Now we get to the
get O'Day on the show, by the way.
What's
I bet Dylan knows him. I know someone who knows Ibushi, by the way, because he told and
get him on.
I asked him about the Jets, and he was like, I fucking hated my experience. And then he went to Houston after and was pretty decent.
Yeah, no, if we can, let's do it. Now we get to the Idzik 12, which is the worst draft that I've ever seen. If you look at, first of all, John and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording, is They had 12 picks in this draft and hit on one of them, which we'll see is Quincy Ununwa, right? Didn't make one trade, didn't make one move. This was supposed to be the draft that went ahead and, really brought this team, back a little bit with 12 picks. And if you look at this, I mean, your first pick, Calvin Pryor, disaster. Jason Morrow, second pick, disaster. Yeah. Dexter McDougal, your third pick, disaster, right? Now you look at 3 fourth-rounders. You took 2 wide receivers. Jalen Saunders, undersized, awful. Shaq Evans, out of UCLA, awful. Then they drafted Dakota Dozier in the 4th round. Got nothing out of him. In the 5th round.
And just real quick on the 2014 draft, that's supposedly the greatest wide receiver draft class ever.
Right. And the Jets ended up with Quincy Enunwa in the 6th round as the best player out of that draft. Right? In the 5th round, Jermaine George. 6th round, Brandon Dixon. Then you go Enunwa. Then you get to Ike Enemkpali, the guy who broke Geno Smith's face. And then you have Taj Boyd and Trevor Ryder. 14 picks. 12 picks in the 2014 draft. And this is what they came away with. It is
all trash.
And obviously Idzik got fired after this, which you can see why, right?
Yeah.
And Adnan and I were at this draft, by the way.
Yeah.
It was the last draft in Radio City. And I was on an NFL Network when they made the Taj Boyd draft pick. Remember that, Adnan? Because I was jumping and dancing around like an idiot because we saw Taj Boyd getting tutored by 3 blonde girls in the dormitory room. We were that's a dog. That's a dog.
Yeah, he ended up being a disaster.
Never playing a game.
Yeah. So this is kind of, for me, I know we'll talk about, Rex and all that. This was a Rex draft as well. And I think this was really the point where you're like, man, there might not be a lot of hope here, And so you move into the 2015 draft. Leonard Williams, you guys tell me.
Quality starter. He's been a Pro Bowler. Quality starter.
Yeah, I teeter between starter.
He was second team All-Pro this year.
Yeah,
quality starter.
Enough. Okay, so you can name Williams as a quality starter if you wanted to. But then you look at the rest of that draft. Devin Smith, 2nd round, bust. Lorenzo Maldin was a reach, bust. Right? Bryce Petty, Jarvis Harrison, Deion Smith, nothing out of that. 2016, Darren Lee, nothing. Hackenberg,
really a bust.
Absolute bust. Jordan Jenkins, would you guys say quality starter? I hesitated there as well, but I thought
all right. I'd consider Darren Lee a bust, considering that he was really an off the ball linebacker.
Yeah.
Not OLB is really he's just like a weak side basically. That's what he was supposed to be, and the linebacker position in the 1st round is supposed to fucking be a home run every fucking time, just because of the positional value. So the fact that he was a linebacker there, and he had a good little stretch at the end of Bulls' run, right? But a lot of that had to do with the fact that they stacked up at safety, and he can kind of be a little more free, right, during that draft. Yeah. So, in my opinion, he was a total bust. Obviously, Hackenberg was a fucking bust.
Yeah.
Jenkins was only really situationally good in Bowles' system.
Right.
And he was just not good. Even I think he got another contract too with us, and he was a bust.
He did. They re-upped him, and then that was that. And then you have a guy
Grant Shell was decent for I give him a starter level just because he was a 5th rounder, but that was when the line really started to shit the bed. I mean, if you also just look at these drafts, these last several ones, count how many linemen are going in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah,
there's none.
Absolutely ignored the offensive line, and that's what it was. And then you lost Brickshaw, the Brickshaw and Mangold, and the line just has now hopefully recovered, right? Now then you look at Lachlan Edwards as a punter in the 7th round. Starter, but whatever, man. And then Sharon Peak ended up being nothing. 2017,
And just real quick, guess who were the last linemen drafted in the first round before this?
It was Brooks. It was Mangold and Ferguson.
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah. Mangold and Ferguson. And going back to what you said, John, in that draft, that was a Mangini draft, right? They took both of them in the first round. Like, and then you move to this kind of regime, and this is what you're seeing, and then in 2017, I would say, Adams in the first round, May in the second round, even drafting two safeties being as redundant as it is, they ended up both being quality starters for the Jets. Ardarius Stewart, I was very disappointed in the third round because he was excellent at Alabama. And then he comes to the Jets and just couldn't separate and just wasn't a great pick. They doubled up on that in the fourth round with Chad Hansen. I mean, look at some of these names: Jordan Leggett, Dylan Donahue, Elijah McGuire, Jeremy Clark, Derek Jones. I mean, just wasted pick after wasted pick,
Last thing I want to say about that Ardarius Stewart pick, because it's kind of crazy, but like the year after Alabama started having receivers.
Right. They were all, Ardarius Stewart was like, he was their third down guy. He was their, like elder statesman, older guy with all the young guys. The Jets draft him, and then you move into all these studs coming out afterwards. It's amazing. Then we go to 2018, which was the Darnold draft. I had him as a starter. I don't know, you guys.
It's fine.
I don't think he was a quality starter, right? Nathan Shepard, disaster. Chris Herndon, I noted as a starter, fourth rounder, had some nice moments, so I didn't want to kill him. Parry Nickerson, got nothing out of him. Fatukasi ended up having a good
he's a starter. Fatukasi's a starter. I mean, he is now with Jacksonville, or at least he was recently.
Well, now he's good. Now he's really good. But with the Jets...
Well, he's being used properly because he was more of a nose tackle.
Right.
3-4, and that made sense in Bowles' system.
Yeah. Nope. Totally fair. And then Trenton Cannon, got nothing out of him. Finally, the 2019 draft. Quinnen Williams, obviously stud, the only S-tier guy they drafted in these, 9 drafts or whatever it is, right? 2 third-round picks. You missed on Josiah Polite and Chuma Edoga. Wesco, Blake Cashman, Bless Austin, ended up being backups. Cashman now is really good. We talked about that, John. He's in Minnesota. So you look at these drafts, and I think this is really the crux of the issue with this team, right? Is how they ended up drafting, comparing kind of the 2 time periods. And if you look at it in a composite way, looking at just these draft classes side by side, just look at the bust rate of, adjusting for the lottery ticket picks, which are rounds 4 through 7, the Jets busted on 9.8, we'll call it 10% of picks. So not terrible. In 2011 to 2019, they busted on 33% of their picks. That's first, second, and third rounders. And I think when you look at this, and I'll jump into the free agents in a second here. I don't have a visual aid for that, but just we'll kind of run through some stuff. But this is kind of the issue, man. I mean, the drafting you can't succeed when you bust 33% over 9 seasons. So to kind of wrap up a little bit here just on the draft, anything you guys wanted to add to this? Anything guys that I missed that you guys saw that you want to expand on?
Well, yeah. So obviously we talked about how it's the parity league, right? It's supposed to bring everything back to the normal. It does that with the draft, obviously, like you said, right? But also with the rookie wage salary system, right? That's how it's supposed to really, because before that, I mean, obviously, what was it, the Bradford pick where they were just like, all right, we got to control it. Right? So, like, obviously, like, the advantage with all these draft picks that they had, and they had probably, I'm going to say, weighted, definitely like top 5 or 10 weighted value for draft picks. right? Probably top 5. We're probably underestimating it. Probably only Cleveland probably had a better weight, right? In theory, during that time period. And like you can't miss on it. And then if you're gonna miss on it, you gotta hit on fucking free agency. But that gets very expensive and very challenging, especially when you can't hit on quarterback in any direction, right? And you didn't do the thing that a lot of those premium picks are supposed to do, right? Solve the big positions, right? As we call it. Quarterback 1, right? Wide receiver, you didn't do it either there, right? You didn't. I mean, Stephen Hill was the only premium pick used on a wide receiver besides Elijah Moore, which we'll talk about after, right?
And Devin Smith as well in the second round.
Bust, right? Then you talk about edge rushers, right? You only hit on one in that whole period in Muhammad Wilkerson, right?
Right.
In terms of edge, right? And then obviously DT was Leonard Williams and Sheldon Richardson, which quality starters or
and Q, who ended up who's a star,
Q, obviously, right? Q was an all-pro, right? But that was like at the end of the road, right? But that's still not an edge, right? You didn't get an edge honestly, and you didn't get any of the offensive line positions. Since Mangold draft, you didn't spend a single premium pick, first or second, as we call it, right, on offensive line. And then obviously corner, like usually that should hit in the first round and just didn't with like D. Milner.
Yeah, D. Milner. I mean, he was injured, but still drafting somebody with an injury history, 9 overall, like they did. You know, that isn't a great move, you know, and then
just look at who they're spending these fucking picks on, right? If you really want to, we'll go from 2011, right? First, only one first rounder in 2011. Muhammad Wilkerson is considered a DT here, right? Yeah. Then you got the next year, Quentin Couples, who I guess you had as a decent starter, right?
Yeah.
Stephen Hill bust, right? Next draft, D. Milner and bust. Richardson D tackle, not a premium position, right?
Right.
Next year, you spend your first and second on a safety and a tight end, and they both busted, which is unbelievably hard to do, right? Then you got Leonard Williams, who was a D tackle, DE at the time because they put Wilkerson in the middle, right? Devin Smith, bust. The next year, Darren Lee, linebacker, bust. Christian Hackenberg never threw a pass in the NFL.
That was the worst.
And then the next draft, you drafted Adams and May with your first 2 picks. Safety. What the fuck are you doing, right? Unless they're both Kyle Hamiltons, what are you doing? And to be fair, Jamal Adams was special, and then he left and then became unspecial.
Listen, I get Adams at 6. I don't get May at 39. And that's
I'm going to disagree with you on that. Because the reason for that, I say that is because you still needed a fucking quarterback. Your solution at the time was Josh McCown, right? And we already know who was drafted after a quarterback, right? I mean, say what you want about Deshaun Watson. Yeah, you like how I went to that name first, right? Deshaun Watson was still a quality quarterback for a while and got paid like one because he was. And then Cleveland happened. You know, Cleveland happens to people. You know, and then obviously, and also the massages. Good luck, Justin Tucker.
Right.
And then Patrick Mahomes seemed to be pretty good. And he could have sat behind McCown for a year and learned a lot.
So I guess so 2017, the argument is should have went quarterback. Yeah, that's fair.
Especially since no one was trading up for a quarterback really then. Like Mitch Trubisky was the first quarterback off the board. And then, like, it cooled off because everyone was a little uncertain about Mahomes and Watson, even though, like, Watson had the more impressive college resume. I mean, he beat Alabama.
Watson was
you know what I mean? He beat Alabama. And Mahomes, everyone was talking about Mahomes, like, there was just too much talent there, right? Even without the record and all that he was going to be a first rounder. So you had guys that were at least first round quality grade, right? Yeah. And you were like, no, we're going to go safety. We're going to double down on safety.
Yeah. Which is
obviously the next year, not Quinnen, Darnold, you had no second because you traded up so much for Darnold, right? For 3 spots. And, you know, Darnold, I mean, it's crazy. That might be the second greatest draft class for quarterbacks after 83, if you really think about it, because you have 3 MVPs in that group, right? With 2 Lamars and 1 Josh Allen, and you have Baker and Darnold, who both made the Pro Bowl. It's a good draft class for quarterbacks. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the Jets, I cannot. I loved Sam Darnold, man. That's the guy I wanted. I loved everything about him, and they just messed it up so badly.
Yeah, and that 2019 draft was so deep, but also like you just hindered yourself with basically what you did to trade up for Darnold, right? And you had only the Quinnen pick. You hit on that. And then realistically, there's a lot of Pro Bowlers in the first round after that, right? Yeah. But, you couldn't do much with it because you traded up. And they lost their 2 seconds, right? They lost the to Indianapolis, right? And Indianapolis did pretty good with those picks, right? But Ja'Kai Polite, my God.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't even get on the field. Like, Edoga, they tried to get him in there, and he was just awful. It just – looking at these names and these picks is just – it's infuriating.
And also, to be fair, in the 2019 draft, there aren't that many Pro Bowlers after the Ja'Kai Polite pick, just to be fair. To be totally fair. There's none of that premium position.
It's just total mismanagement.
Well, I think the other piece of it, right, is Pro Bowl. I get, but these guys couldn't even step on the field. That's my point. You got nothing out of Polite.
Right.
He couldn't even step on the field.
Just bad management.
Well, he was a weird one. If you remember the way it was, he was supposed to be a first rounder based on just college alone, right? And he was really light in college, right? So he tried to bulk up, and then he just, when he put on the weight, he just didn't know how to manage that new weight, right? That's really what happened to him. And then he also really just did shitty in the interviews, right? So he got just got let go in that draft, right?
Yeah. And they took a chance on him, and it didn't work. And it just, we look at this. I mean, this is just. And we knew this going into it, right? Just kind of being fans, remembering, thinking about it. But when you actually go through it, class by class, name by name, position by position, you see how bad it actually was. And I do get, again, killing Woody. But man, how many of these draft picks did Woody have a hand in? It's so bad that, you set yourself up for failure for 9 seasons, which was an absolute nightmare. So I think I'll just kind of run through here a couple of the big free agent signings, in that time period. Right. And I'm not going to name everybody, just going to throw out a couple, a few names per year. And, this information, just to kind of give credit, is from Gangrene Nation. So I just wanted to pull this out here. And then all the stuff in the Google sheet is from Pro Football Reference. So let's look at 2012, kind of the 2 signings that worked out. They didn't do much. LaRon Landry and Jeremiah Bell, they were decent. They also signed Chad Shillings. What's that?
You're still sharing the same document. I don't know if you were trying to change documents.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to share anything for this part.
Okay, then I'm going to get rid of that. Very
actually,
good.
I can just pull this up and we can look at it together. Give me a. And then for 2013, couple of good signings, right? Willie Colon ended up being pretty good. DeJuan Landry, decent. Unsuccessful guys. Some of these names: Mike Goodson, Antoine Barnes, Kellen Winslow II. I forgot they had him on the team even. 2014, you ended up with Eric Decker, which was a home run, right? Yep. But you also signed Michael Vick. Michael Vick, Brino, Giacomini, Chris Johnson, Dimitri Patterson, Jason Babin. 2015, James Carpenter ended up being a pretty serviceable player for them. This is when they re-signed Revis. They brought back Cromartie, Screens, Gilchrist, Kellen Davis.
Brandon Marshall.
2016. They traded for him. These are just free agent signings.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough.
2016, they signed Stephen McClendon and Matt Forte. What do you guys think about Forte in terms of success? Not that.
Dude, I remember going to that first game. It was a Chicago Monday night game with Matt Forte. Is that right?
I believe
God, that was
so
rough to watch, man.
we all like Matt Forte because, like, fantasy, right, was really picking up
Right.
the years before, and he was with the Chicago teams. But I mean, he was just too old at that time, and he'd been through a lot of work in Chicago. So it just wasn't going to work, and even and not just as a runner, but also in the receiving game. Like
I actually have a Matt Forte jersey.
You do have a Matt Forte jersey. I know that. I was hoping you would say that.
Yeah.
And you also have a laughing with the Turbulence and New York Jets podcast hoodie now. Congratulations.
I've been had that.
The thing with Forte is, like, he was one of those backs that did it all, right? Receiving, running, all of that. And you wanted him to be so good, but it just ended up not working out.
Right, exactly.
2017, the bigger signings, Kelvin Beachum, Morris Claiborne was an interesting one, the corner out of LSU, and then Josh McCown. I think McCown ended up being exactly what he wanted out of a backup quarterback. Beachum ended up being a decent starter on the offensive lineman, and I think Claiborne did something to solidify the secondary. 2018, you had Avery Williamson, ended up being a pretty good signing. Then you had John's guy, Trumaine Johnson, Spencer Long, Terrell Pryor, and Isaiah Crowell. Crowell had some nice moments, but Terrell Pryor was just a nightmare. And then finally, 2019, you ended up doing pretty well with Jameson Crowder, and Brian Poole was good. That was also Le'Veon Bell, disaster. C.J. Mosley, who you like a lot, but was vastly overpaid. And then Ryan Khalil, who was supposed to be the guy at center and ended up leaving. So free agency wasn't very kind to them either in that time frame.
Were you guys with me during that first game against Buffalo with C.J. Mosley being, like, basically the second coming of LT at that time?
He got hurt in that game, right? Did he get hurt?
But also I remember talking to Ryan, because Ryan was sitting right next to us from Jets Talk 24/7. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he was just starting the channel, and I think he was there with O'Leary. I could be wrong though, because I recognized him, and even like during the game, I'm like telling him, like, dude, like, they're not playing well, even up 16-0 or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously Mosley was playing like LT on steroids and cocaine,
I remember we were at that game, and then he got hurt, and they fell apart as soon as he got hurt.
And then was mono the next week, right? Yeah, it was.
I think it was, and then it was mono, and then that was
mono, and we went to Philadelphia and got sacked 10 times and lost. And then the Cowboys game was the first win of the year, right? Yeah.
And then so the last thing I wanted to run through quickly were some storylines that I thought were interesting from that time period, right? So 2011, I thought this was really telling when the Jets cut Jericho Cotchery because they wanted to bring in Derek Mason. Cotchery was a really productive receiver for them. They cut him after his request because he knew they were looking into Derek Mason. They cut Cotchery, brought in Mason, and then they traded Mason that October, which was a ridiculous move. Second, 2012, Tim Tebow and a second rounder they received from Denver for their fourth and sixth round picks. And that was when Woody Johnson was quoted as saying, "You can never have too much Tebow," and it ended up being an absolute nightmare.
You can.
It destroyed Sanchez.
Destroyed Sanchez. Yep.
One Tebow, it turns out, it's too much.
For Peyton Manning, you got to remember that too. They were in the running for Peyton Manning that year, and they didn't get that done.
Yeah, and then they ended up pivoting to Tebow. Yep, and it turned into a nightmare. And then 2013, the Jets trade Revis to the Bucks for the 13th overall pick in the 2013 draft. Revis signed a 6-year, $96 million contract with the Bucks, making him the highest paid defensive back in NFL history. They release him the next season. He signs with the Pats, wins the Super Bowl. Pats release him after the Super Bowl. comes back to the Jets in 2015 for 2 seasons, released in 2017, but he did make a Pro Bowl after the 2015 season. So
He was a
that
liability though that year.
Yeah.
Remember the Sammy Watkins game at the end of the year?
Yep.
He was a
So that was
liability. He had lost the step already by then.
He did. And then 2015, Geno Smith gets punched in the face in training camp by Ike and Pauly. That opens the door for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Last winning season for the Jets. They go 10-6. And then finally, I think the most hysterical one, 2019 Thanksgiving. Adam Gase skips Thanksgiving with his family to prepare for the 0-11 Bengals, and the Jets lost 22-6, and they didn't score a touchdown.
I lost so much money on that.
That was the end for Gase there, and that is my wrap on the 11 to 19 period for the Jets. And just to kind of recap, the Jets failed in every area possible, right? The drafts were an unmitigated disaster, literally outside of Quinnen Williams. Free agency was a disaster outside of CJ Mosley, even though he was overpaid, and then these just circus clown show stories that permeated throughout that time frame. So I think, when you look at this, for me, 11 to 19, if you have to pick one big thing, it's going to be the drafting. It was just a nightmare, and it gave them no hope for the future. And I think that, John Idzik should never be allowed near a football team ever again after that 2014 draft.
What's crazy is the plane started flying over the stadium then. Fire Idzik, if you guys remember that.
Yeah, I
It
remember.
didn't even last the full season. You're right, a full calendar year. You know what I mean? Which is crazy.
Yeah, New York
Really
is brutal, but they
You-
were right in that case.
Yeah, you made me really depressed there, Adnan.
Hey, man.
I was all hyped for this whole thing before, and then you started rolling through a lot of this. And by the way, you did an excellent job. I'll give you the clap on this.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
But my God, I fucking hate myself, dude. I had season tickets during that whole fucking stretch.
I was just gonna say, how many games did the three of us go through or go to while all of this was happening?
I could tell you because I have a document that tells me who went to what game.
It's
one of the saddest documents ever created. Just for context, right? I went to so many fucking games, dude. I'm like looking at this now. I went to, oh, wow. No, I really don't want to do this, man. I really don't want to do this. 90, I'm trying to take out, this includes preseason too. I went to about 90 games of that misery, this misery stretch, and it still continues into my end of the stick, which is coming up right now. I almost want to play the video again, but I'm not. Now it starts. The firing of McKagan is really where we start this whole thing, right? Which is basically the beginning of the Joe Douglas era. And Joe Douglas had the benefit in this time period. Basically, and I'm just putting a note for the things. He basically got the team after Adam Gase and McKagan made this draft, and it was a horrendous draft, and everyone knew it. Outside of Quinnen, who was the only blue chip guy that they picked, even though you could argue they probably should have went with a pass rusher at that time, or more of a premium position, right? Because there was the other Josh Allen, right? Who ended up being a Pro Bowler and an edge, and that would have solved your issue there at the edge, right? And there's just a bunch of other picks there that, Rashawn Gary, right, was in that draft. Nick Bosa you couldn't get to, but that was the real prize of that draft. Brian Burns was quite good, right, as a pass rusher there. But just D-line in general, that was a loaded draft class because Dexter Lawrence and Jeffrey Simmons were in that draft class too, right? But it's just, and Montez Sweat, that's another edge guy that was really good. But anyway, you could have figured on that. But Adam Gase got hired by McKagan and was just like, dude, we need to get this fucking guy fired. So he got him fired, right? And Joe Douglas basically had the benefit of just sitting back for the 2019 season and just looking at this whole organization and this whole player roster and coaches and literally everything, and just was basically
there to sit back and basically he couldn't really do much at that time because pretty much all the money was already tied up in free agency because McCagan spent a shitload of money that year. And he also drafted really poorly. So there's not much to do there. I think the one move they made, who was the center that we drafted, we signed that used to be a Panther?
It was Ryan Khalil.
Yeah.
Khalil. Yes. We signed Ryan Khalil. That was it. Because Joe Douglas was just like, oh my fucking God, this offensive line's a fucking disaster. And you have this fucking quarterback and you didn't solve anything on offense. You didn't solve it. You got him Le'Veon Bell and Jamison Crowder. Are you fucking kidding me? That was the best that you could do. And Quincy was already like his neck had fallen off and he got a big deal as well. So like, what the hell were you gonna do at this point? So Joe's like, all right, let's just evaluate what we got here, right? The defense showed some life, right? Jamal Adams had an all-pro season, right? And he was fantastic. And basically Joe's like, we gotta blow this whole fucking thing up, right? After this 2019 season, right? 2020, what could go wrong? COVID. Okay, so COVID fucking happens, right? And like the thing that you got to look at during this time period is that you got to fucking evaluate people that you're going to pick, like livestock, right? And you also got to evaluate players that are going to be acquired through free agency and all that. And the whole thing was very challenging and so many fucking unknowns, let alone that this was Joe Douglas's first time in the driver's seat, which is I give him a little bit of a pass on this year. And also, mind you, he's trying to build a team with Adam Gase and I got Greg, what's his fucking face?
Williams.
Greg Williams, right? And it just nothing seemed to work, right? All they did that was significant in a positive way was things like Bryce Huff, John Franklin Myers was that year too, I believe. Yeah. Later on, because he was acquired after the Rams Super Bowl loss, right? Okay, so maybe even the year after that, before that, sorry. But, you know, they couldn't do much. Connor McGovern, George Fant, and just a couple pieces on the O-line just to kind of Band-Aid it. Because in the end, we talked about this, since 2006, they hadn't drafted a premium offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds, right? The only way to really succeed is building the O-line through the draft. And then maybe patch it up a little bit with some free agency. And the teams that do it the best are teams like the Cowboys and the Eagles. Like that's how they did it, right? And even Baltimore to some degree, right? Because I mean, think about it. They let go of 2 guys this year, Simpson and Morgan Moses, and they ran the ball like a motherfucker this year. And Lamar had what should have been an MVP season, but there was maybe a little Lamar Jackson MVP fatigue, right? Anyway. So the draft comes, and obviously this was supposed to be a loaded tackle class, and it was, if you think about it, because you got Andrew Thomas, you had Tristan Wirfs, you have Jedrick Willis, and you had Mekhi Becton, right? So they obviously hit. I believe they hit on Mekhi Becton, but Mekhi Becton got fucked with the injuries, right? I believe they did. And
I don't agree with the Mekhi Becton hit.
I'm with Monty there.
After his rookie year, I feel like his rookie year he was great. But you know, the injuries the next 2 years, it's tough, especially at that weight. I give him and this year, he got put in a position that maybe he's a little bit better on the knees because of the horizontal movement. He was moved to guard, and he was fucking awesome for the Eagles. And he's got a ring. And congratulations, Mekhi Becton. I'm going to share a screen now because I can do whatever I want. But I'm going to share the draft class. Okay. So obviously this is our first draft class with Adam Gase, right? And Joe Douglas. Mekhi Becton. I say it's a starter level, and I think that's fair. Not quality starter. I say it's a starter level.
That's fair.
Denzel Mims, absolute fucking bust. Ashton Davis, backup. Jabari Zuniga, I can't believe you decided to take another fucking chance on an edge guy from fucking Florida in the 3rd fucking round. You had your cop example here. Why would you do it again? Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. And then you had LaMichael P. Ryan, who actually we liked for a while.
Dude, I liked him, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah. Then James Morgan, which was a Florida quarterback. I mean, you had Darnold. It was meant to be a backup, whatever. Cameron Clark doesn't, Bryce Hall, not Breece Hall, Bryce Hall. He was a starter for a good little while, ended up being a backup. We would consider him a backup in this case.
Yeah, he's
Brandon Mann,
if you draft a punter, it should fucking hit. I don't know. I can't see.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then the offseason starts, right? Where basically Joe Douglas makes the big blockbuster move that set up the Jets draft for the next one. He trades away Jamal fucking Adams, who he was the best safety in the league at this time. He traded him for 2 firsts, a third, and he gave up a 4th, right?
Gave up a 4th.
Who was the safety he got from Seattle?
Yeah, I forget his name. He also he got a starting safety who ended up being pretty decent.
Yes. So he won that trade, obviously.
I mean, that's one of the best trades I've ever seen. Like, I don't know how he pulled that off, getting 2 first rounders, and they both led to AVT and Garrett Wilson. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Right. But the thing it's not the greatest trade ever. The greatest trade is the Herschel Walker Cowboys.
Well, right, fair enough.
Oh. Just because what was it, 3 Hall of Famers?
Yeah, no, I mean, no, fair enough. Maybe in Jets history. Actually, no.
Jets history.
The Curtis Martin trade.
No, you could argue the Keyshawn Johnson trade was a better trade.
Keyshawn, yeah.
It set him up for the decade.
That's fair. It
was and it made us not hate Woody that early on.
Yeah,
it saved Woody. That trade saved Woody Johnson from maybe. Actually, that's probably what would have been better. If it wasn't for that trade and Woody Johnson had taken over that team and the Jets just sucked right off the bat, he might have sold the team earlier. Also, I want to note, too, with the Geno Smith thing, if Geno Smith doesn't get punched in the face, maybe he does really well in that 2015 season. We have the quarterback of the future then. So, hindsight, he had that one splash of Fitzmagic, but maybe it was a Fitz disaster. Anyway, how was the 2020 season? Well, I couldn't go to the games. No one could go to the games because we had to sit and watch those from home. And the Jets started off 0-13, right? Including a fucking all-out blitz on a Hail Mary for the Raiders game, which got Greg Williams fired immediately after.
I will never forget that.
Never forget it. But then somehow, we're like, oh, we're going to get Trevor Lawrence. Yeah. No one had heard of Zach Wilson at the time, but Trevor Lawrence was the prize. You had already gotten a proven commodity out of Clemson at a time with Deshaun Watson. Yep. Deshaun Watson was good at the time. He was very good at the time. And this is before the massages and going to Cleveland and all that, and probably still getting massages right now. But then they decide we're going to win 2 fucking games. We're going to go to LA where no crowds are anyway, even if there's COVID restrictions. And we're going to beat the Rams, who were a good team then. They were a playoff contending team at that time, which is unbelievable. That game made no sense. And then we beat Cleveland. And Cleveland was on the up with Baker at that time. And still that makes no fucking sense.
Right.
And then we lose the last game. And I remember we were kind of cheering for that last win because it was against the Patriots, wasn't it? And we lost that game anyway. And that was not a Tom Brady Patriots team, which is really sad. Okay. Pause. We go into free agency. We start piecing things up together a little bit in 2021. But we know that this draft pick, number 2, what are we going to do with this number 2 pick? And what are we going to do with that Sam Darnold guy that we have, right? We trade Darnold after Case gets fired, obviously. And the whole staff is gone. Robert Saleh comes in. They evaluate what they want to do with Darnold. Did they make the right decision at the time? Probably not. They probably didn't. But the fact they were so bad in 2021, it probably set them up for the 2022 draft. Am I right on this, guys, or not?
I think that's
I think that's accurate.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I think you're also kind of correct thinking in hindsight. And even at the time, I was 50-50 on do you trade Darnold or not, right? Like, I thought Sam Darnold was going to be incredible. And it looks like he's turned his career around a little bit here, but
he still does the same things that were kind of problematic with us.
Yeah. You saw that in the last 2 games of this past season, right? So
you definitely did. You definitely did.
But yeah, I think but you also think back, man, if they could have traded 2nd overall, kept Darnold, they would have gotten a haul as well, you know?
Well,
so
the example is to look at what Miami did trading out of 3. Because it was basically the same thing, right? They end up with Waddle anyway, and then they ended up gathering some other pretty awesome picks just to kind of bolster up everything there. I think who's the guy that's in the Raiders now? I keep forgetting who it is. Christian
Wilkins, yeah.
they did pretty good with those picks. I mean, they didn't go all at once, but they did pretty damn good with those picks. So, like, hindsight, they probably could have gotten even more because it was really there was some people questioning whether or not Zach should have been first that year, which just based on the tape of having no people in the stadium and no fucking pressure, BYU soaking it up, and I use that word soak.
Okay, enough. But you know what was interesting? Like, just talking about BYU, right? Like, that was during COVID. I remember, like, betting on because BYU always played Saturday night, 10:15, the only game on ESPN. You couldn't go anywhere. I watched and bet on every single one of those games. And when you watch when you watch Zach Wilson, I mean, man, just effortlessly throwing the football, was athletic, could make every throw, and you were just like, man,
he was a bum slayer, though.
Yeah, he was. And mind you, that COVID year, the reason why Adnan was betting late on BYU and not on Hawaii or the rest of the Pac-10 at the time, because California had more restrictions then, and they weren't really opening up the doors then. Yeah. So that's why when you were chasing college football bets, you were chasing with BYU that year.
Yeah, and it forced me to watch a lot of Zach, but I did make a lot of money on Zach Wilson, so I'll give
and then you lost a lot of money on Zach Wilson
in the NFL, yes. But I just remember watching him play, and I was like, man, because it was interesting with those quarterbacks, right? Zach, Trevor, Trey Lance, and Mac Jones. After Trevor Lawrence, all four of those guys were a mixed bag, right? So you were kind of like, and you saw what Zach could do, and you just said, we'll take the chance, and it did not work out. But continue, John, sorry.
Yep, no, it's totally fucking cool. But basically, like, it was a very, very strange time for them. But there was some free agency that happened. I'm starting to blank on the notable free agents in 2021. There really isn't too many things there that were great, right? George.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing
2020 you said was. Oh, I'm sorry. 2021. I have it here. Kevin Coleman, and then you had Keelan Cole, Gerard Davis, Sheldon Rankins, LaMarcus Joyner, Tyler Croft, Vinnie Curry. And then
it was just guys
Lawson and Corey Davis too.
Yeah, it wasn't Lawson and Davis. Those were the two big ones.
Yeah.
Lawson gets hurt in fucking preseason, of course, and so did Mekhi Becton got hurt in the first fucking game, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I think it totally changed his career and his future earnings. He might get paid big time this year to be a guard. But anyway, after the free agency, we had the draft. They kept the pick. And they decided to go with Zachy. You know what? I'm just going to go full screen here just to make it easier. We go with Zach, and then obviously AVT, which has been a home run, quality starter in this fucking league, right?
I agree.
And it gets a little funky. They missed out on some of the receivers in the 2021 draft class because it was a pretty decent class. But Elijah Moore was a bust, although he had a good spurt for a little bit until Garrett came into the picture, and then I don't know what happened. Also, the size factor mattered. Michael Carter was a good little spurt in the beginning. He got banged up at the end of that 2021 season and just wasn't the same after that. Sherwood now looks like a fucking home run quality starter right now, which is crazy to say, but that turned into a really great pick. Michael Carter is still a great pick despite not a quality starter, just despite being injured. I mean, he's one of the best slot corners in the league, and Joe Douglas didn't pay that much to re-sign him, which was a smart move at the time for now. Pinnock hasn't really done much. Hamza didn't really do much. Brandon Eccles is a quality backup.
Listen.
Quality backup.
Yeah, bring him back.
Bring him back, yeah. And then obviously Jonathan Marshall did jack shit. Okay, so 2021 plays out. Zach, has some up and down games, right? And some really up games. Like I think the Tennessee game's the one we really remember where he dominated that game.
Was that the Tampa Bay year too? Was that year?
I'm getting to that game. Okay, yes,
yeah.
That was the Tampa game. Yeah. And the end stretch for Zach was very good in his rookie season, just like it was with Darnold, and we had hope going into the next season. You thought you found the guy because this guy actually went toe to toe with fucking Tom Brady. And a defending champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. And I remember being at that game and fucking, I had no idea who was like streaking across the field. I had no idea what the fuck was going on in that game. Apparently, that was the last we're going to see of Antonio Brown before creating the greatest Twitter account, CTESPN. It's the greatest Twitter account. I fully endorse Antonio Brown's Twitter account. And he's also very expensive to bring on the show, apparently. So we're not getting him. But anyway, you had hope. That game against Tampa, it's more notable because Braxton Berrios was your best receiver at the time, given that like Elijah Moore was on and off, right? There just wasn't much. He was hurt a lot, and Corey Davis got knocked out early in the season too. Mm-hmm. Braxton Berrios was your leading receiver in that fucking game. I
cannot. Braxton Berrios,
and your O-line got banged up too, which is why I think the next week was Buffalo, and they got absolutely destroyed. But anyway, 2022, you still have another first rounder from Seattle, and it so happened Russell Wilson got hurt in the year, and that pick got really good, really fast. It became a top 10 pick. Free agency, you start filling in more cracks with free agency. We all know who it was, so I won't get into it. Also, because I'm forgetting right now, because I've been golfing all day in the sun. Florida is awesome in the winter. The draft comes. This is the draft class for the New York fucking Jets. This draft class had it all. It started with home run after home run after home run after home run. Sauce. You can't, even with a down season that Sauce just had, it was still a high quality starter level year. Yep. It just wasn't all pro first team. Garrett Wilson. By the way, it looks like he's looking to be a Jet long term and looking for north of $30 million a year to be a Jet.
Pay him right now. Pay him right
fucking now. Jermaine Johnson, he was going to have the breakout year this year, but he had it the year before. It's too bad he got hurt, but he's an edge guy that plays both sides, both run and pass, and can tween like John Franklin Myers. Breece Hall. I mean, there's no running back that looked more electric out of the gate than Breece Hall until that ACL tear. Am I right on that?
No, I agree. And he still has a lot of 2 years removed. He's going to be very good still. But yes, I agree.
Yeah. Jeremy Rutger, I guess you can call him a bust because it's a third rounder.
Yeah.
Even though it's a late third rounder, sorry. It's really late in that draft. It's really late. Max Mitchell, I'd say backup at this point.
Backup, I think, backup in a pinch, swing tackle, whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, and crazy as it is, Michael Clemens, even though we hate Michael Clemens, the results, I would call it that, the results of Michael Clemens, but the fact that you got what really is a rotational quality backup at the end, I would call him a quality backup because fourth round edge, you're not really finding anything there, right?
And I also think the Jets did him a disservice, right? He was never supposed to play as much as he played last year.
Correct.
If you kept JFM, if Jermaine Johnson doesn't get hurt, Michael Clemens is suited for 10 to 12 snaps a game.
Run defense snaps on the edge, and Will McDonald coming in rotationally with him on the pass.
Yep.
That's how it was supposed to be. But no, what do you got involved? Anyway, how does the 2022 season start? Starts up fucking great. We go into Lambeau and destroy Aaron fucking Rodgers.
We were there.
High we got after that game?
Dude, that was one of the coolest experiences. But after that game, I remember we walked out of Lambeau and we were like, dude, they're 5-2. And just smashed
4-2 at the time. They're 4-2 at the time. The next week they went 5-2, and that's when the injuries happened to AVT and Breece.
So yeah, but we walked out. We were just like, "What is going on here? This team can do something, man. How did they win?" And it was just, and the game itself, the way they played, it was such a high, man, such a high.
Dude, I mean, I just remember we were hugging random Jet fans.
It was. And we took over the stadium at the end. All the Packers fans left. We moved all the way down. You just heard the Jets chant. It was incredible. The players were coming up to the fans. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Broncos game happens, and that's ABT's kryptonite, apparently.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
Brees got hurt, and that was bad. They win that game. They squeak by at 16-9. But then Patriots, we can do this finally to the Patriots. No, we somehow fucking lost that fucking game to the Patriots. Zach looked so fucking bad in that game.
Mm-hmm.
So bad. Then the Bills game. We won that game against the Bills. And we were just like, okay, we're 6-3 now, and we're fighting for a division at this point.
Yeah.
Fighting for a division at that point. Then we go at New England and 3-10. And that was just the ugliest fucking game to watch. No, and the defense, they got disserviced so badly in that game. You beat the Bears the next week, and then you're 7-4. And you're like thinking, I guess that was the Bears game was the Mike White game. Am I right on that?
The Bears, yeah,
No,
yeah,
no.
no.
The Bengals game was the Mike
Bengals.
White game. We were at that one, John.
We want Mike
I'm
White.
pretty sure it's fucking Bears, dude, because I don't see the
No,
Bengals
we were
beat
at
3, and we lost that game.
No, we were at the Bengals game when Mike White was there. I will never forget it. I will never forget that game.
I'm right on this one, guys. I am right.
Dude, the Bears game was
31-10. Mike White fucking slugfest. That was the game.
Are you talking about the first game where Mike White went
was the starter? Yes, that's that game. The Mike White game is the Chicago game.
The one where he went nuts?
Yep, 22 of 28 for 315 and 3 touchdowns.
There's no way that's the game.
I feel like I'm right on this, guys. I feel like I'm right on this game.
There's no way. There's no way.
Oh,
He made his first.
No, he threw for 400 yards against the Bengals.
Yeah, the Bengals was his first.
Yeah, he had a stunner game versus the Bengals.
no,
Yeah.
the Bengals. I'm looking at it right now. Holy shit, the Bengals torched us week 3. There's no way he could have thrown for 400 yards against the Bengals.
Oh, you know what? We're thinking of 21.
It was the season before.
This is the season before that. Yeah.
Is it really?
It's the season before.
Yeah, season before that. Right. He played.
Zach. You're right. Mike White
Yeah.
was that game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Mike White comes in after. I'm sorry. You're right, guys.
Yeah, it was the season before that.
Golfing all day in Florida. It makes you lazy.
No, it's all good, man.
But anyway, 7-4. We go to Minnesota, right? And this was a very pivotal game at this time because Minnesota was really good that season, right? If they win that game and Barrios fucking dropped that easy touchdown at the end of the game to basically lose the game, like you could have made
is
the if you win
infuriating.
that game. But it all went downhill there. You lost to the Vikings, you lost to the Bills, you lost to the Lions, which was a disaster if you remember that game.
That game, I will never forget that game when they hit that play in the fourth
Special teams
quarter.
touchdown they give up, and then the fucking cross play
Yeah, and
to a
wide
no-name
open.
tight end on 4th down.
Yep.
Man, Campbell was established, and the Lions. That's when the Lions started to get really good, really fast. Like they didn't make the playoffs that year, but they knocked out the Packers at the end.
That
of
was
it.
the year they not. Yep.
But that was the rise of the Lions, and and after the bye week, they were like 1-7 or some shit like that, and they really started to ascend at that point.
Yeah, man.
Then you lose to Jacksonville really poorly. And
Dude, that was the Thursday night game in the rain, right? That was where was that the game where they played what's his name? Streveler?
No. Yeah.
That was the game. They played fucking Chris Streveler in that game, right?
Yeah. At the end of the game.
Yeah. And like they brought him in like the fourth quarter.
Yeah. But also, if you remember the way that game started, Quinnen had a sack fumble in the beginning of the game. And then they stalled out 3-0, kicked the field goal. They're up 3-0. And then they gave up 19 straight points, which is amazing for so many fucking reasons, right?
Yeah.
Fuck. They lose. Okay. 2023. We have a championship caliber defense at this fucking point. And offense, we have some really great pieces at this point, right? What do we do at the most important position, which is quarterback?
Fucking blow it.
You fucking blow it. I almost want to give this to you, Monty, because I'm a little exhausted. But in the end, they decided to go all in on acquiring a quarterback through free agency or trade. Fucking Rodgers had to go on Pat McAfee and said he went after the ayahuasca shit. The Jets were the answer. Holy shit. We were so excited. We're like, we're getting Aaron Rodgers and we're going to the fucking Super Bowl. And the trade eventually got done right before the draft. We traded away a conditional, which thank God that was a conditional pick, right? If you really think about it.
Seriously.
He still got fleeced. Joe Douglas still got fleeced on that trade, though.
He did.
Because there was Aaron Rodgers was not a huge demanding market for Aaron Rodgers. He said he wanted to play for us. It just was a waiting game, really.
You don't know that. You don't know what the market was.
Yeah, we do. There was who was beating down the door for who was really making noise like
Vegas.
These things.
Vegas had Devontae Adams and Derek Carr was on the loose.
Yeah, but that doesn't impact Derek Carr. Doesn't impact the market for Aaron Rodgers.
Well, the need for a quarterback, it does.
Well, there were also rumblings about the Titans, right? Like there was,
but it never got past that. Like when these things happen, you hear about it from Samini and Rappaport and all these types of guys who have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the league. You didn't hear any real credible anything. About you knew that the Jets wanted him and you knew that he was likely going to go to the Jets, and then it just all materialized that way. Whereas with Rodgers, there was no connection to any other team. Therefore, I think, also looking at, age and all the other factors, the season he had just come off of, I think Joe Douglas absolutely got fleeced on this trade.
He did.
Not even in hindsight.
It only got fleeced because the first year of Rodgers was such a disaster. 4 plays in. 4 plays in. And 4 plays. Serviceable starter, I guess is what you can call him after 2024. But that's it. And the injury maybe diminished that a bit. And also not having a full season with that roster. Probably what it is. But anyway. So we get Rodgers. We're very excited. We go into the draft. We're all high fives at this point. We draft Will McDonald. No one knew who the fuck he was. And you didn't see anything out of him in 2023. But last year, I won that bet on Monty. I'll keep mentioning it the end of the time.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Joe Tippmann, new center of the future.
Love Joe Tippmann.
Yeah, and those are the only premium picks, first through third rounds. And you got... you could almost call them both quality starters at this point.
I think McDonald's short enough to be a quality starter, and Tippmann, I think is approaching S tier almost because he's going to be your next Mangold. I'm that confident.
Oh, I'm sorry. Quality starter is higher than S tier, according to you, though.
No, S tier is the highest there is.
Yeah, S is the highest.
Okay, star. Okay, star. Sorry. But yes. Yeah, he's. I mean, if there was a better result of the Jets this year, he would have been probably considered in the Pro Bowl. He probably got some votes. But anyway, after that, it's all lottery picks, day 3 picks. Carter Warren, backup. Izzy, friend of the show.
Our guy.
Mm-hmm.
Had some flashes. He got banged up in the preseason and just never got back. And then the Jets went different on the running backs the next draft, and holy shit, they were right.
And they were right for once, yeah.
They were right. Barnes, we never saw. Bernard Converse, we only saw a couple. I think the one game against the Eagles is what we saw him in. And that was about it. And Zach Kuntz, which I guess it makes sense why he was a 7th round pick, being bigger than Gronkowski, right?
No.
Okay. And now we go into the 2023 season. We're at that Monday night game. We're so excited.
Yep, we all three of us were there.
We saw football before. It was raining during the pre-game, and then it stopped raining, and there was a rainbow in the sky. I remember walking walking through the parking lot. The ratio guys to girls was closer to 50-50 than it ever had been, and there were so many hot chicks ready to see Aaron Rodgers sling it for the Jets. Jesus. It's true.
Continue.
defensive stop after an easy not an easy first down, but a very, very close pick 6 by Sauce Gardner on Diggs. All right. But they stop him after that. And then Rodgers comes out, starts the ball at the 4-yard line, whatever the fuck it is. Brees makes the big run. I'm looking at you guys. We're like, we're going to the Super Bowl. Look, if I have to go through the rest of the details here on what happened in the 2023 season, you've been living under a fucking rock. It was a rough season. I'm going to stop at that. I don't want to do it.
We know
I
how
don't
it
want to
plays
relive
out.
that season, man.
Yeah.
But you know what I think for that season, in all honesty, doing kind of like a deep dive, the only thing you really have to say about it is Rodgers got hurt.
Yeah, because that
right,
was
like there's nothing more to
I
analyze.
saw a fucking
for
rainbow.
2023.
I saw a
Rodgers
rainbow.
got-
That was
Rod-
life directing
Rodgers-
itself as Jet fans.
Rodgers got hurt, and we got 7 wins, and somehow. And
The defense played out of its mind again.
And we had
It did.
offensive and defensive rookie of the year.
The year before, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. That was the year before. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, but you were back to back, basically first defense off the board, right? And DVOA and everything.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brees Hall went off. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just fucking nasty. That defense was so nasty, and that offensive line was not quite there. But it wasn't there. It really wasn't. Fant was done, right? Fant was not there.
No, that was
Fant
what's
was
his
not
name?
there.
No, that was what the hell's his name?
It was good enough, though. It was good enough at the time.
Oh, Dwayne Brown.
Yeah, Dwayne
And
Brown.
Mackay Becton.
Yeah.
AVT got hurt again too.
ABT got hurt. Yeah, it was another tough.
McGovern got hurt. Tippmann went in.
Everyone got
Got
hurt.
banged up. So many injuries on the offensive line for consecutive years. It was just amazing.
Oh.
Joe Douglas tried everything to fix that offensive line. And then that was his last gift to us. And I'll leave this to Monty to take over.
Mm-hmm.
But go ahead, Monty. So
now we're into 2024. We've gone over the abysmal decade plus prior. The false hope and front office blunders and coaching dysfunction. But, now we have Aaron Rodgers and he's healthy, and, we have draft picks, and we have some studs on offense, and we have an elite defense. What could go wrong? Right. Yeah, well, it was terrible. It was terrible. I mean, everything went wrong, really. But yeah, so it kind of starts off a little bit early. Rodgers comes back from injury and then misses mandatory mini camp to go to Egypt, and the media has a fucking field day with it. But unfortunately, by coming to New York, he's made the savior by default by just coming to New York. So he gets held to a standard, and it's juxtaposed with the freewheeling lifestyle that he lives. And it's not really a good thing for him to be doing stuff like that. And that, I think, set a poor tone in some ways. You can't square the idea of that with, oh, we need to get rid of anything in this building that we're doing that has nothing to do with winning. Remember when he said that? And then he goes to Egypt, a little hypocritical there, right? So, but anyway, so yeah, that kind of set the tone. And then, we'll look at the offseason moves here. We picked up Tyron Smith, which we, thought was a home run. He was significantly diminished, even though his PFF grade overall was a 73.7. So he still was kind of rated highly and still was doing what he needed to do in a lot of ways, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't elite. It wasn't what we thought we would get out of him. We knew he wouldn't last the whole season, but we thought he'd at least be elite while he was there. That didn't play out. Morgan Moses, he was solid at 63.3, overall PFF grade. I think he was a solid, offensive line role player. John Simpson, highest graded O-lineman, did great pickup. And this is starting so well. You would think that things kind of went well for us, but and they did okay on the line once it gelled. which is another problem that this offensive, unit and offensive line had. But then, we had Mike Williams, who didn't do shit. He also was underutilized, but he didn't do shit. And then he didn't even have enough snaps to be graded by PFF for last season. But of course, he did have that one FU touchdown that he got immediately after being traded to the Steelers because, of course. Of course. Then now we get into some of the losers here. Well, before I get into losers, let's talk about Tyrod Taylor, 74.5 PFF overall. Didn't see a lot of time on the field because we were still obsessed with Aaron Rodgers and we just couldn't break away from that in any way whatsoever. And he did arguably give us our best chance to win, but we still should have seen more of Tyrod, and his PFF grade, I think, shows that. But it seems like he was a solid acquisition, solid so much so that, after it was all said and done, the Jets ended up moving away from Aaron Rodgers at the end of the season. Maybe we'll see how that plays out, but he was solid. Now, some of the losers, we had Javon Kinlaw, just sucked. Just a terrible, replacement. He was overdrafted by the Niners and, just didn't cut it over there. And they they fenced him off to us. He just couldn't get it done. Just not an impactful run stopper, which we thought he might be. Lakey Fotu, 36.3 PFF grade overall. Absolutely just didn't do shit. Just wasn't an impact at all. Then we get into, Hassan Reddick, which was like one of the big blunders of this whole offseason by the Jets organization and Joe Douglas. And it was just handled so poorly. 53.5 overall. And just so you guys, at home know, just as a reminder, for the PFF grades, 60s are considered average. 70 and up is you're a good player, 80s, good, great, 90s, you're on Pro Bowler, all pro. That's kind of how it goes. But anything below a 60 is not really, you don't want that starting for you if you can avoid it. And here's a guy who was, one of the top sack leaders over the past 5 years in the NFL. We think, oh, what a great move to get him and pick him up. We don't have to overpay for Bryce Huff, who was clearly a situational guy. And then we bring him on and he doesn't do shit because, the Jets of course, made the dumb chicken mistake of trying to play chicken in a make or break year with a guy who already made it clear that he wants a new contract. Now, it's definitely fuck Hassan Reddick too. I hate that guy for what he did. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to defend him at all. He's a piece of shit for the way he handled his this offseason, negotiation. But, he did make it very clear that he wanted a contract. And when you trade for someone like that, you give them a contract. That's pretty much the unspoken rule. You don't, you'd be hard pressed to find examples of teams trading for a player that asked for a contract, that left the team because they wanted a contract and that team wouldn't give it to them. And then they went to another team and then that team didn't give them a contract. It's very, very, weird, situation, stupid situation, terribly handled. And it came back to bite us in the ass significantly. Yeah, I know. Then we had Olu Fashanu, which was a solid, getting to the draft now. We had Olu Fashanu, first rounder, solid. I think he's he might be our future at tackle. The guy's been playing all over the line. He's been doing what was asked of him. And when Tyron Smith inevitably got hurt, like we knew he would, Olu stepped in and was able to be, a good enough guy. He came in at a 61.2, average starting grade, which is actually pretty solid. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, but mind you, that grade also incorporates him being a guard and a right tackle, which is not his natural position.
Fair. Yep.
Right. I mean, that kind of goes both ways. It's guards in the easier position, so it's maybe a little easier for him to excel. But
he never had a grade lower than a single game, lower than a 63.3 at left tackle.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good for your first year coming out the, because there are a lot of guys, you could pick up who don't start that strongly and, and they're starters in this league. So kudos to Fashanu. I hope he ends up working out well, but that's what we got. Then we got Jordan Travis, who hasn't done shit and might not ever do shit. I don't know if this guy ever plays a snap for the Jets. I was a little excited about him in the context of if everything worked out this season. It clearly did not. But if it worked out and we kind of kept the band together for a few more years after, then I was excited for Jordan Travis to be, maybe the future of this Jets organization at quarterback, and maybe he might still be. But the fact that he was drafted by the prior regime, who just got, totally all nixed and kicked out, ran out of town. And the fact that he's been hurt and hasn't been able to get healthy, and he's had numerous setbacks, and it's basically a year past the draft almost now, and he still hasn't even taken the field, like in terms of any with pads practicing anything like that. My with the new regime and everything considered, I don't think he'll do anything. So another wasted pick, probably.
Fifth rounder, though, mind you.
Fifth rounder, fine. Yeah.
Lottery pick.
Right. He had upside, but, and we'll talk about that with Joe. It's just, it's another upside thing. Quantez Stiggers, he was solid, 58.3 overall. I think he's good.
I think he has some promise, especially when you're looking at a secondary that's probably going to be without DJ Reed. You have a corner 2 opening, a corner 4 opening. If you bring back Eccles and start him. So I think he showed enough, and he's an interesting prospect. So, can't kill that as a fifth rounder.
Played 14 games last year, in and out.
Yeah,
exactly. And then now we get Malachi Corley, another not enough snaps to be to be graded, but definitely enough snaps to show that this guy fucking was not worth being whatever the 4th highest graded receiver that Joe Douglas had in the draft. And he just definitely was not, anything. We couldn't get this guy on the field. He's not getting on the field all season. We're like, what's going on? He finally gets in. He showcases his speed a little bit. He gets an easy touchdown run in, and he drops the shit. Just drops it.
That was
absolutely terrible.
That was the Texans game, right? Like, at least imagine if they lost that game because of that. Like, I mean,
it would have been very Jets. And it probably would have helped us if we had lost that game, given that where we're at with the draft right now.
Yeah, but still, man, at that point,
we kind of should have, because
that was the Garrett Wilson catch in the back of the end zone, which is one of the top 3 catches I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Is it crazy to say that 3 of the greatest catches we've ever seen, 2 of them are Garrett Wilson, and maybe the other one is Odell Beckham?
It was that one against and the one against the Buffalo game, right?
Buffalo Bills where Aaron Rodgers went down. That where he taps it to himself.
Dude, he's so good, man.
He's so good. Pay the man.
Dude, once they re-sign him, I am buying every piece of Garrett Wilson memorabilia and clothing and everything that I can.
He's a Ring of Honor guy already.
100%.
If he re-signs and everything plays out, I think he's a Ring of Honor guy.
I will say this about Malachi Corley, because I'm looking at the wide receivers drafted after Malachi Corley. There's really not much there.
Yeah,
except for Luke McCaffrey is the best one out of that.
I'll also say about Corley, right? I mean, Monty, you and I railed against this and about this the whole time. When you have Downing and Keith Carter and Hackett as your offensive coordinators, like Malachi Corley is, at least this stage of his career, he's more of like a gadget guy, more of a guy that you have to find out how to get him the football. He's not Garrett Wilson. He's not going to line up, beat the guy, run great routes. He's a project. And I think for Corley, the problem was they didn't have imaginative offensive minds to get him in the right positions, right?
Yeah,
so you look at a guy
Gibson
like
was there too, and they were using Gibson so much.
And one of the things that Aaron Glenn said about Tanner Engstrand is that Engstrand was the guy who designed ways to get the Lions stars the ball. And then it was Ben Johnson who called plays based off of that. So,
Right.
I mean, you know, if you can get someone here that can use him the right way, I don't want to give up on him, is what I'm saying, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, listen, like I said, not enough snaps to grade, but
Yeah.
you know, that touchdown situation definitely put his ass right in the doghouse
Oh,
where he
100%.
belonged. And he just never should have been rated as highly as he was by Joe Douglas. That was a big theme of Joe Douglas, was kind of thinking he's the smartest guy in the
Smartest
room
guy.
in a lot of cases, in my opinion. And and I'll talk more about him a little bit later. All right, now moving on. We did actually hit pretty nicely at running back. Isaiah Davis, not enough snaps to grade, but 5.1 yards per carry. He had a rushing touchdown and and he went 9 for 12 for 75 yards, 8.3 average, and a receiving touchdown, which is solid for a guy you got in the
Fifth
fifth
round, right?
round? Yeah, fifth round.
Monty, can I ask
Yeah.
something really quick? I'm sorry
Yeah,
if I
sure.
missed this.
Go
I
for it.
apologize. How many snaps do you need to play to be graded?
I actually don't know.
Not much.
I was good.
It's not that
much,
many.
right?
It's not that many.
Really not
It's
that
definitely
many.
not that many.
Okay.
I
Now,
think
they can do it with a small sample, but it's just not very
It's just
accurate.
not representative at a small
Like
sample.
Fashinu's best run blocking game was the Cardinals game, and they only ran the ball 5 times in that game.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, I think they look at it over the game and over the season, and then they try to come up with something. But he just had neither. He just wasn't being played because he wasn't there. Too much of a project, and just that's way too highly rated that he was to be a project guy. Just bad. And then my guy Braylon Allen.
I love him.
I love him. I think he's a solid power back. I think the right organization. I think that's why I'm happy we got Aaron Glenn now coming from the Lions. I want to see, that David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs type split with, and I've mentioned this many times, with Breece Hall and with Braylon Allen. I think we can do that. And, and Isaiah Davis, another big boy that can catch and that can run hard. I think that's a great running back room with the right people running the room. Right now we had the wrong people running the room. So now let's get into kind of the season, just a quick, overview of it. We open against San Francisco. We get our ass kicked. We get out schemed, by Shanahan. Jordan Mason is, a backup at the time, and no one really even knew who he was hardly. And then McCaffrey was injured. We thought that the Jets might have had a chance to be competitive. Wasn't very competitive of a game. We got our ass beat. We beat Tennessee on the road. Jets showed improvement. We adjusted. But looking back in hindsight, the Titans were one of the worst teams in the NFL last year. So, we should have beat their ass and we should have beat them handily. It shouldn't have been a close game, but that was indicative of where the Jets were. Moving on, then we play New England. We beat the absolute shit out of New England. That was the most rewarding, victorious, awesome, fun game that I went to all last season. And, we really much enjoyed that. That game really had us thinking that we could, maybe do something this season. But, in reality, New England was also one of the worst teams in the NFL last year too. So we just beat up on a bum basically. And then we go to Denver, and this was just a heartbreaking loss in a wet game versus a team with a rookie quarterback. It just, the Broncos ended up being pretty good. They made the playoffs, but we lost 10-9 to them. We should not have lost to them. We couldn't capitalize on key opportunities. That was where I really started to get deflated about this season. Right off the bat of week 1, I thought we weren't going to be really, I was not impressed. I felt this team wasn't what we needed it to be at week 1. Right. No, actually, right after week 1, I said that. And you guys were like, how can you tell already? And honestly, it's just eye test. And I'm not like a football genius or anything.
The Patriots game, we were like, after that, we were just like,
yeah. But I also knew the Patriots were not that great. I didn't see what I wanted to see in game 1. And then after game 4, I definitely didn't see it. Then we go to Minnesota. Minnesota comes along and, beats us, away in London. Woody gets his butt hurt because London is his, home away from home. And he lost in front of his, hoity-toity bigwig London friends. So he goes out and fires Robert Saleh. And that was pretty much the beginning of the end. Before that, I think the Jets were kind of teetering on, are we going to suck? Are we not going to suck? Kind of leaning more towards not being a high end team, but at least I think at that point of the season, we could have maybe been a middle of the pack team. But then after that point, we go on we continue the losing streak, and that losing streak goes up to 5 games after that point. Ulbrich is interim head coach, and he is just completely in over his head, just can't do the job. He doesn't give up the play calling duties on defense, and then he keeps, and then he's the head coach, and he's just kind of thrown into the fire. He wasn't ready at all. He wasn't the guy for this, and he's got an extremely challenging situation. So I kind of feel bad for Ulbrich in many ways, but he just wasn't it. What were you going to say, Adnan?
No, I was going to say, like, I think his biggest mistake, you said it, was not giving up the play calling. If he gave up the play calling, I think it could have went maybe a different direction. Now, playoffs, I don't know. But, it could have been better. But, man, first-time head coach, keeping the play calling, it was just a recipe for disaster. I think he did that to himself. Put him in an awful position, like you said. But, man, you got to give that play calling up.
Yeah.
Thinking of that Tony Odom call plays. Or they could have, whatever they needed to do, they could have done that. But,
Yeah. Then
This is so depressing, man.
Oh, I know, dude, and it gets worse.
No one's gonna like this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, some people are, we're going to talk about. I'm going to give some analysis too at the end of this, about what happened. So, I think people will get that value because honestly, I've been, I wanted to make this video really bad because I wanted to see videos like this, and like there isn't really that much content out there. There's some people that do a deep dive and they kind of touch on some things, and some people don't. Some people just do a little like 20-minute video, 15-minute video. Like I wanted to see a real deep video, like really, how did the fuck did we get here? How is this organization this incompetent for this long? And I think we've done a good job and are going to do a good job when it's all said and done. Excuse me. Now continuing on, we go to Buffalo and lose versus, a Buffalo team that came out looking dominant. And, even though the score was close, I never expected it. I don't think anyone ever expected
Tyrod touchdowns at the end. No.
Yeah, not really. Doesn't really care. Yeah, it doesn't really count. Then we get our ass whipped by Pittsburgh. Then we get beat.
Pittsburgh game.
Then New England.
Tyrod was at Buffalo. Never mind.
Yeah, then New England gets a revenge game against us. We magically beat up on Houston, but it's a 1-score game, and it only really is because Houston was banged up, and we kind of had their number.
Well, Houston scored at the very end, right? That was bullshit. One score.
but yeah, I mean, we kind of had their number from last year. I mean, that was a good game for us, but I mean, Houston was very banged up on offense. They didn't have any of their receivers, and I just felt that it was just you could explain it away that way, and also there's upsets in every season. Every season has teams that lose to teams that they shouldn't. We play Arizona and get absolutely destroyed. I said going into this game, I said, Tyler, oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? QB for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray. That kid, I said going into this game, because we were in our group chat, I was like, this kid is going to break a record today against us. Like after like the first series, I said that. And then I think he puts up the most yards by a QB by a Cardinals QB in a game, or the most in Cardinals history, something like that. So
I'll pull up the stat line for him.
So that was just embarrassing, and like we didn't even score a touchdown that game, or we scored or did we score and miss the extra point
at the end of the game?
Yeah,
we didn't. You're right, just field goals.
Yeah, we didn't score a touchdown that game. That's what I thought.
Oh my God.
that might have been the single
Tyrod
worst.
had the Kyler. Sorry, I said Tyrod. Kyler had the highest completion rate of a Cardinals
Yes.
quarterback.
Oh, dude, yeah, it was
24,
stupid.
266 yards, 1 tutty,
Yeah.
and I believe he ran for 1 or 2.
He couldn't miss that
ran
game.
For 2. Yeah, he ran for 2.
Yeah, and the Cardinals were a beatable team. They weren't like, these
PBR
elite
95.5.
Yeah, they weren't some elite, team, and and their coaching like isn't really elite either. It's just they just beat the shit out of us because we sucked and we couldn't get out of our own way.
That's such a like.
Outside of any Jets bets over under 50-50 coin flips, that was the only one I lost was the Cardinals over under for their wins.
Wow.
Dude, Monty, it's so funny that like you're just like, because we suck. It's like that can just be this entire video. It's just you saying those words and then we just wrap. All right, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. We suck. All right, so keeping it going. I'm trying to move through these a little quicker because I got some things to say after. We lose to Seattle. We lose in overtime to Miami, which another divisional heartbreaking loss there, especially because we had a lead in the fourth quarter in that game, and then we end up losing in overtime. Just Aaron Rodgers had a 300-yard game. I think that was his only of the season. That was his only 300-yard game of the season. Then we play Jacksonville. We beat Jacksonville, but hooray, they suck. I'm not really impressed about that. We get our ass handed to us by LA, the Rams, and Buffalo absolutely demolishes us as they get ready to go into the playoffs. They get into playoff form. And then we play Miami again, and they beat us even worse.
We beat Miami the second time.
Oh, I'm sorry. We beat them the second time. My bad.
I was at that game. That was my last game in the seats, and it was very upsetting.
You're right.
Rodgers threw 4 touchdowns in that game.
Yeah, they kind of just gave up on their season a little bit. They weren't where I don't know. Miami is another team.
They had a shot at the playoffs actually with that game.
Yeah. So now, just talking about Douglas really quick, it was kind of a sad situation, his firing. The sadder situation was Saleh, though, because I think Saleh was the bigger impact by far on the season. I think that, at least a couple of those one-score games might have gone our way. I think Saleh could have at least gotten us back to where we were, which was the seven wins. But ultimately, if we weren't going to at least break even, if we weren't going to make the playoffs, if we weren't going to have a winning record, then I guess the better option is for us to have the worst record as possible, because then we get a better pick. So it kind of worked out, I guess. And then moving on to Joe Douglas, he was kind of dealt a bad hand. Like he had, the McCagnon team to start off that he didn't get to dictate the foot he started on. And then he was kind of playing catch up for the rest of it in some ways. And then, when he actually had to draft the QB, he had no QB options to draft because there's not been a single QB that really panned out from that draft yet. So you could argue that, that he just didn't really have any options, and any option he picked would have sucked, even if he got Trevor Lawrence. And then the owner just stepped right over him towards the end there, blocking him from getting Jerry Jeudy. But at the same time, he could have kept, Darnold. He didn't need to draft Becton. He didn't need to draft Corley. He didn't need to get rid of JFM and get Kinlaw. In my opinion, Joe's main
do you think that Woody had any influence on any of that?
Maybe. I don't know. If you listen to The Athletic and you listen to the rumor mill and whatever little insider info that we do have access to. Yeah, I mean, I kind of do believe that. I do believe, because I mean, he just got an F as an owner rating. I mean, some of that
the coach got a B, right?
I didn't see.
I think it was a B plus or a B minus, one of the two, B or B minus. I saw for the coaching they got B minus. I'm pretty sure on that one, which makes no sense, right? Because you had Nathaniel Hackett in that fucking roster.
Yeah, I was gonna say you had Nathaniel Hackett, I don't know, and no one's defending him. No one is defending
and Keith Carter, right?
Right. Yeah, all those guys suck ass, and
Did you see Keith Carter is The Minnesota now?
Minnesota, I know. Yes. Darnold is done for.
Yeah, they better trade that poor guy.
Darnold's going to be seeing ghosts again. He's going to be seeing demons now. Yeah, but anyway, so what Joe's major downfall, in my opinion, was, is overvaluing upside and minimizing downside risk. Like taking Becton over Tristan Wirfs was a perfect example of that. Like Becton is, a big 7 foot tall, 500-pound gorilla of a man, but there was some things, there was some worries there. Even if you're just looking at the fact that bigger guys aren't the ideal in the NFL at the tackle position. You don't want a 350 pounder because they come with injuries, they come with issues. Like the best guys are like more in the 330, 320 range, around that height, that 6'6", 6'7", that 6'6" height. More of the 330, a little bit more of a lean, strong guy, as opposed to just like a big behemoth like Becton, right? And then there's just a failure to bring in like that backup back in 23 at QB. He took a lot of big swings on things, and some of them paid off, but a lot of pivotal ones did not. So peace out, Joe Douglas. He ends up fired along with the rest of most of the staff. So, just ending the season, we had the in expected points added per drop back, we were 18th. Expected points added per rush, we were 20th. Points per game, we were 20th. Aaron Rodgers almost eclipsed 4,000 yards. He was about 3,900, 28 TDs and 11 interceptions. Our leading rusher didn't even break 900 yards and he had 5 touchdowns. Breece Hall. Garrett had another great season, though. God, I hope that we re-sign him and everything goes well there. 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns. The kid's a stud. Re-sign him right now. So let's talk about the keys to what happened and why it happened the way it did. I think starting with at the top, Jets kind of believed their own hype and they skipped the fundamentals, right? They thought they could win off talent alone and they didn't have the coaching to back it up. If you don't run the ball, you don't win the turnover battle, you don't stop the run. Yeah, exactly. Don't have the discipline. You don't win on third down. You're not even playing 500 ball in that case. The Jets, run game was, 31st in the NFL in rushing yards per game. And we only had 8 rushing touchdowns, which was 3rd worst in the league. Turnover. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even realize. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Turnover differential was bottom 5, so we were not getting turnovers. We only had 7 interceptions all season. Third down conversions, we were 15th in the NFL at 39%. Red zone scoring, 21st. Penalties, worse than the league. The Jets just did not play disciplined, winning football. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, but they just relied on, I think, star power and names, and that just doesn't work. You need the coaching and you need the discipline and you need the organization. So, moving on to the defense, we had a major regression in this defensive unit. We went from literally elite to just overwhelmed. The 2023 defense was legit as fuck. Like, we were 4th in pressure rate, despite only blitzing 16% of the time in 2023. That is amazing. That means the solid system.
You're beating with 4.
The solid system is rushing 4 up front, generating pressure with those 4, and then not really blitzing a lot, and that allows the rest of the defense to do other things and be free to kind of play up, play back. The corners can be elite and they can shut down the receivers, and good things happen, even though for whatever reason is that defenses don't generate a lot of turnovers. We were 7th in sacks in 2023. We were 2nd in passing yards allowed, 3rd in total yards. Elite defense. But then you go to 2024 and everything just fell apart. Sacks, we dropped in sacks by 35% because we just couldn't generate the pressure. Our blitz rate jumped up 57% from 16.3% to 25.6%, but our pressure rate still fell outside of the top 10. which is crazy with how much we increased our blitz rate.
Yep.
Points allowed, we gave up 404 points, 23.8 per game, which was 12th worst in the NFL. And then why do we collapse? So, again, like I mentioned, the solid system depends on the four up front working well. So, no John Franklin Myers, due to organizational ineptitude, no Bryce Huff, which was, I'm getting to that, which was not a bad move, actually. No Bryce Huff. Getting rid of him was a okay let go. But Jermaine Johnson, we lost due to injury. And then, that just meant no pass rush, especially when you add in the Hassan Reddick fiasco. We let him hold out for so long. By the time he came back, he was trash, and he didn't have the offseason to play with the team, couldn't gel, just awful. And our scheme failed. You know what I mean? So, like I said, the four up front weren't generating the pressure, and the rest of it is hinged on that. So, without that upfront pressure, even bringing the blitzes, it just wasn't effective, right? Undisciplined, unreliable. Then now moving to the offense was a collection of plays, not a system. It was a mess, right? So we have Aaron Rodgers, who wasn't really the problem, but he definitely was not the solution. He ranked 19th in deep pass attempts, which are pass attempts over 30 yards, and 31st in air yards per attempt. The guy was just completely gun shy and totally afraid to air the ball out consistently. And that led to a situation where teams were pressing us, and they just wouldn't give us anything long, and he wasn't taking anything long. So we now have all these plays underneath, pass after pass after pass. We're not running the ball effectively, and then so now
You can't run the ball effectively when the
and
box
we
is
could
fat.
right, and we couldn't run the effectively because they know we're not passing long. So the field effectively becomes very short, and we're relying on Rodgers' accuracy to drive us up the field. But then we're also a very terrible team at penalties, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we just beat ourselves. So all they had to do, every team, and you'll see this if you look at the film, all they had to do was give us a little bit underneath, take away the back of the field, take away the depth of the field, and wait for us to make a mistake. And that's exactly what happened on drive after drive after drive all throughout 2024. And then our offensive play calling was trash. Half of our first down plays were runs up the gut. We're sending Breece Hall, who is a elite shifty, cutting, elusive back, and we're sending him up the gut, like he's Mike Allstott. Like, no. Like you got to scheme guys like that into space, right? But we weren't doing that. We were 187 points behind the division leader, Buffalo Bills. So we just could never catch up there. And the offense just didn't have an identity. It was very disjointed play calling. We weren't even really running an offensive system. What you're looking at a lot is Rodgers freelancing. They brought him in, right? I know they brought him in to cover for the fact that we didn't have a functioning offensive system. And so they thought he was going to do the Peyton Manning thing, changing the plays at the line, but it ended up just being a collection of plays that didn't fit together. And this, again, was supposed to cover for how terrible Hackett was, but it just did not work out. And this is why,
I think the other piece of that, right, exactly what you're saying, I agree with, but it's also like, even Peyton Manning didn't change every single play, right? It was like maybe 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10. But you saw they had so many delay of games because every single play, Rodgers was trying to get them from a bad play to a good play. So it was a disaster, but continue.
Yeah. So it was just, once the teams figured out, the aforementioned things that I mentioned about taking away the field and giving us underneath, and the fact that we couldn't run the ball, we just had no counter punch. And so now, moving on to the running game, the Jets only had one game all season with a 100-yard rusher, only one. And that was against, who was that against? It was it was actually Buffalo. Breece Hall ran for 113 against Buffalo.
Wait, the
somehow.
first one or the second one?
The first Buffalo game.
Okay,
The first
okay.
Buffalo game where we lost. Yeah, that was the only one. But only
Should've
one,
won that
and then
game. The defense let them up in that game.
yeah, and we were second worst in total rushing, third worst in rushing touchdowns, second worst in rush yards per game. It's just bad. It was bad running back play, but it was really bad offensive play and offensive line, run blocking play. And
I would
but
disagree on the run blocking though. It was pretty decent though. Like the run blocking was not the problem. I mean, you said it
guys
before.
were not getting to the second level though.
They couldn't because once again, you were talking about the field not being able to stretch it, so the linebackers should just clean house on that shit. And on top of that, you were relying on tight ends who couldn't block, right? And you didn't have a
that's included in that. The tight ends who can't block is included in that.
I'm just not
I'm not saying like John Simpson and Olufashinu just sucked forever. I'm saying that as a unit, they just couldn't really get it that greatly. They couldn't get it done at a high level consistently when it came to the run blocking. And then also that it goes back a lot to the scheme and to the to the play calling. Sure. So yeah, it's all tied into each other, right? So, and then the Jets knew all this, was not working out. So it caused us to be over reliant on the old, Aaron Rodgers, the aging Aaron Rodgers, who, like I said, was gun shy and never pushed the ball down the field because, he knew that the whole offense was resting on his arm. So, I kind of feel a little bad for him in some ways, but, maybe it is time for a clean break from him. And then just in general, just a, dysfunctional culture and self-inflicted wounds, the Woody Johnson meddling in all the football decisions, that athletic hit piece that just really highlighted how dysfunctional we are. And the player grades now kind of seem to back that up. We're looking at Madden ratings to make player decisions, the Reddick decision, pushing for Adams like in the middle of the season when we weren't even Devontae Adams away from anything meaningful, and we ignored our O-line issues for too long. Then when we finally did fix it, they just couldn't gel soon enough. They gelled a little bit late in the season. Coaching was never an advantage for us throughout this entire regime, really, but especially last year. Saleh rarely adjusted mid-game. Ulbrich was overwhelmed. Todd Downing is not an OC or a play caller for a serious team. Keith Carter is not an O-line coach for a serious team. He's an assistant at Minnesota. He's not the main guy. The team was just built on very, very shaky ground from a coaching perspective and just collapsed in on itself when adversity hit. And then the self-inflicted wounds I mentioned. Penalties killed us. Number one in the league in penalties, 137 for 1,134 yards. We had better
1,000 yards, dude.
1,134. Yeah.
Yeah, but that seems low for what we were doing.
No, I let me see. I had the.
I know you thought it was like closer to 1,000,000 yards, right?
I thought it was 1,100 yards a game. To be honest,
yeah, right. It definitely did feel
yards a game, though, right?
It definitely felt that way, right?
What's not a game?
But,
11,
well, I think the reason is that we actually kind of turned it around towards the end. Like we weren't getting as many penalty yards per se, but we were still, killing ourselves with penalties. I think later on what it shifted to was we would just get penalties at really, really bad times. So it felt like we were always getting them, but in reality, we were just getting them whenever it counted.
So it was 11:34, you said?
Yeah.
That's 66.7 yards a game.
That's really high.
Yeah, that's high.
You got to figure that's high with decline penalties too, right?
Yeah, that doesn't include decline penalties. Yeah, so that's 66 yards a game is insane.
Yeah. And I guess when blowouts are happening, calls are not going out there. Field.
Yeah. So, so it was. So we were first. Actually, Baltimore was right behind us with 132 for 1120 penalty yards, and Tennessee was third. Dallas was fourth. Cleveland fifth. And then it kind of, they're all kind of close once you get to that point there. But anyway, so just to kind of round this out, we had the most defensive pass interference calls in the league. We had the second most unnecessary roughness calls in the league, and the third most delay of game penalties in the league. The delay of games came from Rodgers kind of sitting at the line a little bit too long, trying to analyze to make sure he's making the right adjustment because he has to, because we don't have competent play calling. And if he gets it wrong, the play is completely busted. But he still was responsible for that. The roughness, the unnecessary roughness and DPIs, just bad. The just undisciplined was really like a characteristic of the Saleh-led team. And I did a little bit of a look at the 49ers when he was DC in the 49ers, and they had a significant penalty increase under him as well as DC. So I'm not sure if that's a Saleh thing or a San Fran thing, or, because he strikes me as a coach and wants to be a player's friend rather than his boss, or rather than his coach. And, that could be it, but we just were, and then, so we were bottom 5 there. And so then we were, and then we had Greg Zuerlein. Greg Zuerlein just totally sucked, missed a bunch of kicks. I think there are like two or three games that we could have won had he missed some key kicks at the end, or at least we would have been in those games. But again, you can't blame it on that. You can't just blame it on the kicker. I know a lot of people wanted to, and we did get rid of him, which we should have. He clearly got the yips and fell off, but it's just, it was just a complete travesty. The Jets were not 2024 were not just bad. They were just broken at pretty much almost every level.
I feel broken after this discussion, thinking about all this.
I feel broken after this season. That's kind of why I was very much
why I gave him my season tickets, dude.
That's why I haven't put on a Jets jersey in months. You know what I mean? It's just I just refuse.
But you've only been recently wearing the swag.
Yeah, but I got it, didn't I? So shut up. Anyway, so it's, we need a reset, which we are in the midst of doing. And I'm happy about it. I'm looking forward to this now with Aaron Glenn. I don't know if I'm fully ready to be heard again, but I'm ready to start paying attention, because this season, I got to tell you guys, I was starting to be checked out right around probably, the Minnesota game or just thereafter. And then I was definitely checked out by like,
Patriots.
By when the Patriots beat us, I was like, oh yeah, this team is ass.
That's when Adnan canceled his flights to come to the games with me, and you were just like, fuck this.
Yeah, and that
but around that time we both were like, you know what?
I was still going to the games like a fucking idiot.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the 2024 season in a nutshell, and hopefully we can turn it around from here, because this was historically bad, embarrassingly bad, every bad adjective that you can think of, like that's what it was. And we need to never do that again.
Dude, I'm dead inside after this, man.
I think one of the
no one's gonna like this episode, man.
But I think you know what it is,
like,
man.
We should just put in the preview, like, are you ready to get sad about your Jets experience these last 14 years? Rock and roll, baby.
But I also feel like it's cathartic, right?
Yep.
That like you go through this, you hear it, you see it. I think we've done a good job giving people tangible, now you know every reason why this happened, right? And you've seen it. You've seen from 2000 to 2010 and from 2011 to today, right? And it's important to go over it, because it's like one of those things, never forget, right? Those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. So let's just, hope that the Jets learn from their mistakes, get better at drafting, understand that free agency is for plugging holes, and the coaching gets better, right? So we'll see.
No,
we'll see.
We're cursed. Doesn't matter.
Don't. We're too
Can't
late
say
in
after
this.
all that
we're
there's
too-
not a fucking curse on this
We're
fucking
too.
franchise.
We're
Shut the fuck up.
too late. We're too late in this pod to start talking about curses. So.
Well, all right, fair
Yeah,
enough.
we are
All right, I
cursed.
will say this because we probably don't need final thoughts because that was a whole
Nope.
lot of fucking shit.
Yeah.
I will say it this week, and it started today, is Combine Week.
Yep.
Next week, we're probably going to talk a lot of Combine. So you have a lot to look forward to there, which is another sign of hope, that goes in the Jets cycle of fucking fandom,
Maybe
Season ends, you're fucking miserable. New coaching staff sometimes, and then Combine Week starts, and then free agency, and then draft, and camp.
Maybe a post combine mock we might put together. Who knows?
I have no idea.
Coming
I
up.
have no
Who
idea.
knows?
All I know is I am fucking dead inside. And if you made it this far in the video, fuck,
You're awesome.
You
You
really
are a
hate
saint.
yourself. You fucking hate
You
yourself.
should be submitted
bro.
for sainthood.
You should be submitted for saint. And the one
Or you're a
way
masochist.
to show that you're a saint of suffering with the Jets fandom is by buying our swag.
Tired of rooting for the New York Jets and wearing their merchandise, but still want to rock their green and white colors? Laugh Through the Turbulence, a New York Jets podcast, has all the merchandise you would need to solve that. Click in the bio to go straight to our merchandise store to buy the stuff that you don't need. We've got hats, sweaters, and t-shirts in all the sizes to fit your fat fucking ass in. Our merchandise was probably made in a child sweatshop somewhere on the other side of the planet where they have never seen a football. But we don't know that, and we don't support it if it's true. But we do appreciate those tiny hands, the cheap prices, and large profit margins that benefit us. So, what are you waiting for? Buy our fucking swag today.
Don't have a job? Well, you've got a kidney, right? Sell it and buy our swag. See a defenseless old lady with a purse? Take her purse and pawn it and use the money to buy our swag. Got some money tucked away for your kid's college fund? Empty the account and buy our swag because your kid is just going to waste that money on a gender studies major anyway. Buy our fucking swag, dude!